Well, in November 2018, Indian representatives were at the Afghan peace conference. The Indian government had sent two retired diplomats, the former envoy to Kabul, Mr. Sinha, and the former High Commissioner to Pakistan, TCA Raghavan. They represented New Delhi at the Moscow talks, but with a disclaimer. India announced that they are there at a non-official level. That was a major departure from India's game plan in the war-torn country. It was for the first time India shared a table with the Taliban, and now India has been officially invited to the signing of the peace deal. Now, India has always refused to engage or negotiate with the Taliban in the past. For strategic purposes, India sided with other forces, and in the 1980s, India formed a failed alliance with the Afghan communists alongside with the Soviet Union. A similarly futile effort was made in the 1990s, which saw it backing the so-called Northern Alliance with support from Iran and Russia. The Northern Alliance fought a defensive war against the Taliban government backed by Pakistan, which ended with the US invasion in its own dissolution. Now, since 2001, under the security umbrella, of the US-led NATO forces, India has built a sizable developmental and considerable intelligence footprint as well. Today, India values its role as a constructive regional player, helping Afghanistan in political, military and economic terms. India has pumped in more than $2 billion in aid and infrastructure development and has also reopened consulates across the country. While it does not have the financial resources like the US to support state building, India needs to protect its presence and interests, and for that it has to deal with the Taliban. India is at a crossroads in its foreign policy strategy in Afghanistan. That which was considered mainstream has now been relegated to the sidelines, and that which was on the fringe is now set to become the mainstay. Now, after the Afghan peace deal is signed, it will finally allow the US to extract themselves from their longest war. The next process would be to enable talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government, and Afghanistan may be able to achieve peace that is durable if both the sides are able to find a compromise that works for everyone. As part of the potential ceasefire agreement, President Ghani has said that the Afghan government is willing to recognize the Taliban as a legitimate political party. It is not the first time that an armed rebellion group has transformed itself into a political party. The question is, will the Taliban too transform into a political party on its own and for itself? Well, Taliban has more than 60,000 full-time fighters, and the group has managed to regain control over much of Afghanistan and are not showing any sign of a pullback. They are still carrying out attacks, proving that their tactical capabilities are only getting stronger. And experts believe that many groups that have entered politics, many not necessarily abandon their campaign of violence. Take, for example, the Hezbollah. It became a full-fledged political party after the signing of a peace agreement in 1989, but have not shown any signs of giving up their arms. They have been contesting elections in Lebanon and have become important players in the parliament. So can the Taliban commit fully to politics? Remains to be seen that the Taliban can be trusted or not. According to a US government assessment, the Taliban does not pose an existential threat to the Afghan government. After all, the basis of negotiations during a conflict is that parties want the standoff to end. But in the case of the Taliban, the motive is still not clear. Experts believe that negotiations could be a vehicle for Taliban to drive the US forces out of Afghanistan and then defeat the government in order to reinstate the Islamic Emirate by force. Similarly, for Hezbollah, the government of Lebanon had argued that their political activity is only a way to continue their anti-Israel terror campaign. Another possibility is the creation of a radical splinter group if the Taliban becomes a political party. Take the case of the IRA, for instance. The group split after the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 granted the formation of an Irish Free State, and the pro-treaty faction grew into the Army of the Irish Free State, but the anti-treaty faction continued to carry on terror activities. Well, after 19 years of a grueling conflict that has claimed the lives of more than 100,000 people, the war in Afghanistan may finally be coming to an end, as we've been reporting. This report now takes a look at the internal political crisis that has threatened to derail that process.
The Surpul checkpost on the Kabul-Kandahar highway used to constantly be under attack by the Taliban. Since the start of the partial truce, the soldiers guarding the post are breathing a sigh of relief.
We used to face relentless attacks. Every day, every night, we faced immense difficulties. Now things are much better.
The same is true for shopkeepers in the Durrani Bazaar in Wardak province. They've even increased their business hours.
I used to close my shop at 5 p.m., but now that there is a ceasefire, I close my shop at 6 p.m. We have not heard any gunfire in the last 2 days.
After 19 years of war, the United States and the Taliban. At the end of it, if all goes well, they will sign a deal on the 29th of February in Qatar's capital, Doha. The deal outlines a roadmap for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, one of President Donald Trump's campaign promises. It also requires the Taliban to negotiate with other Afghans, including the government, on the future direction of their country. In Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Tuesday the goal is to reach an Afghan solution.
Our mission set is very clear. We want to assist and provide structure so that the Afghans can ultimately get an outcome that is led by Afghanis, driven by Afghanis, and is a long-term solution that all of the people of Afghanistan can live with.
But the Afghan government is in turmoil following presidential elections in which two candidates, incumbent Ashraf Ghani and rival Abdullah Abdullah, have declared victory. The bitter standoff comes at a time when Afghan politicians should be building consensus on how to negotiate with the Taliban, says analyst Michael Kugelman.
And yet, at that very moment when you most need that common united front, these long-standing divides within the Afghan political class have been exacerbated because of this political crisis coming out of the elections.
Getting various Afghan factions to come together in one representative team to negotiate with the Taliban was already difficult. Observers say this crisis has just added to it. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Islamabad.